I first heard about the German castle mystery from a retired archivist who lowered his voice even though we were alone in a cafe. He said the story was never meant to leave the valley, but it always found a way out, usually through whispers, footnotes, and people who couldn't stop themselves from telling it. At the center of it all was someone nobody expected, a Filipino caregiver named Mateo. Mateo arrived in Germany the way many Filipinos do, quietly, practically, and with no intention of becoming part of history. He was in his late 30s, trained as a nurse back home, working overseas to support family members who depended on him. His assignment was simple on paper: care for an elderly countess who lived in a centuries-old castle tucked into the varying countryside. The castle was real, massive, and intimidating, with stone walls thick enough to silence modern life. Mateo had never seen anything like it. He joked later that it looked like something from a movie, except there were no cameras, no actors, and no instructions on how to behave inside it. The Countess, Frau Adelheid von R., was well into her 90s when Mateo arrived. She was sharp-minded but physically fragile, confined mostly to her bedroom overlooking a forest that locals claimed had never been fully mapped. Her family lived far away, visited rarely, and trusted hired staff to maintain the property. Caregivers came and went. Mateo stayed. From the beginning, the castle felt off, not haunted in the way horror movies show it, but heavy. Sounds traveled strangely through the halls. Doors creaked even when untouched. At night, footsteps echoed where no one walked. The local staff dismissed it as old architecture, but Mateo noticed something else: patterns. Back home in the Philippines, Mateo grew up in a household where elders were listened to closely, not just when they spoke directly, but when they spoke around things. His grandmother used to say that old people tell the truth sideways. You had to pay attention to pauses, repeated phrases, and what they avoided saying. That habit followed him to Germany. The Countess often talked in fragments. She would mention a room that should not be opened, then change the subject. She asked Mateo more than once if he believed that places could remember things people wanted to forget. When he answered honestly that in the Philippines, many believe land and homes carried stories, she smiled in a way that made him uneasy. One evening, while helping her settle into bed, she asked him a question that seemed harmless on the surface. "Do you know why this castle is never sold?" she asked. Mateo shrugged. "It has been in your family a long time." She laughed softly. "No buyer would want it." Not if they knew. That night, Mateo couldn't sleep. His room was in a renovated servant's wing, colder than the rest of the castle. Around 2 a.m., he heard a sound he had come to recognize: slow footsteps moving toward the east corridor, an area that was supposedly unused. He checked his watch. The Countess was asleep. No other staff were scheduled. Instead of staying in bed, Mateo did something that would later define the entire story. He followed the sound. He didn't find a ghost or an intruder. He found a locked door. The door was old but well-maintained, its handle polished by generations of hands. There was no dust, no cobwebs. Someone cared for it. The footsteps stopped right in front of it, then faded. The next day, Mateo asked one of the older housekeepers about the east corridor. She stiffened immediately and told him it was none of his concern. When he pressed gently, she muttered something about family matters and walked away. That reaction confirmed what Mateo already suspected. This wasn't superstition, it was secrecy. Over the following weeks, he noticed more inconsistencies. Records in the castle library ended abruptly around the late 1940s. A portrait in the main hall had been removed, leaving a lighter rectangle on the wall. The Countess occasionally mistook Mateo for someone else, calling him by a man's name he didn't recognize, always followed by an apology. One afternoon, during a moment of unusual clarity, she said something that shifted everything. "They blamed the war," she said suddenly, staring out the window. But the war was only convenient. Mateo didn't respond right away. He waited the way he had learned to do with elders. Silence, in his experience, was often an invitation. "There was a child," she continued. "Not mine. Not theirs. But still ours." After that, she said no more. Mateo began to research quietly, using his days off to visit the local town archive. He discovered that the Von R family had indeed lost a child in the late 1940s, but the official cause of death was vague. No grave was listed. No church record confirmed a burial. It was as if the child had vanished from history. At the same time, the castle staff began treating Matteo differently. They watched him. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Once, he found his notebook moved, its pages slightly bent. Another time, the door to the east corridor was unlocked for the first time. Inside, he found a small room preserved like a shrine. Children's drawings lined the walls. A wooden toy sat on a shelf. Dust covered everything except the bed, which looked as though someone had smoothed the blanket recently. This wasn't abandonment. This was maintenance. When Matteo returned the countess to the room that evening, she looked at him and said quietly, "You found it." He didn't deny it. For the first time, she told the full story. The child had been born out of scandal, hidden away to protect the family name. After the war, when resources were scarce and scrutiny high, the child became a liability. An accident was staged. The staff were sworn to silence. The castle, once a symbol of pride, became a monument to guilt. "What does this have to do with me?" Matteo asked gently. "You listen," she replied. No one else ever did. The mystery, it turned out, was not about a haunting or hidden treasure. It was about a lie that had lasted 3 generations. Matteo encouraged the countess to speak to her remaining family. At first, they resisted. Then they threatened legal action. Then, finally, one of her grandchildren visited in person. What followed was not dramatic in the way movies portray confrontations. It was quiet, painful, and slow. Documents were brought out. Names were spoken aloud for the first time. The truth, once acknowledged, could no longer be contained. The family arranged for a proper burial. A small ceremony was held, private but real. The room in the east corridor was opened, not to tourists, but to light. After that, the castle changed. Not magically, but noticeably. The strange footsteps stopped. Staff turnover slowed. The countess slept better. Matteo stayed until her passing the following year. At her funeral, the family publicly acknowledged him, thanking him not just as a caregiver, but as the person who had helped them confront something they had avoided for decades. When asked later why he got involved, Matteo gave a simple answer. "In my culture," he said, "caregiving is not just about the body. It's about carrying stories until they can be put down." The castle still stands today. Visitors admire its towers and take photos of its stone walls, unaware of the quiet resolution that took place within them. There is no plaque for Matteo. No documentary officially credits him. But among the locals, the story remains. The Filipino caregiver who solved a mystery not by searching for clues, but by listening. And in doing so, helped a place remember the truth it had tried so hard to forget.